Welcome back, everyone, to the Wisdom of Laozi.
Great to be back. Today we're continuing our journey into the wisdom of Laozi, and we're taking a deep, unblinking look at Chapter 18 of the Tao Te Ching.
Ah, yes, Chapter 18. This chapter is truly something special, isn't it?
It really feels different.
Yeah. Here, Laozi isn't just a philosopher in the abstract sense. He's acting more like a master physician, a diagnostician for society.
A diagnostician, I like that.
He's not just, offering simple remedies for surface-level problems. No. Instead, he's diagnosing a really profound societal illness. And in doing so, he challenges practically everything we think we know about what it means to be good, to be virtuous.
That's a powerful distinction. A physician not just prescribing, but diagnosing. So our mission today is really to uncover how Laozi, with this almost surgical precision, dissects our conventional views on virtues.
Right.
He suggests that many of the very qualities we celebrate, the ones we give awards for, the ones we teach our kids to aspire to, might not actually be signs of inherent health at all.
It's a radical thought. He proposes they are symptoms of a deeper, lost natural harmony.
It's an idea that, honestly, when you first hear it, feels deeply unsettling, maybe even a bit subversive.
It absolutely can feel that way. But by the end of this deep dive, our hope is that you'll gain what we like to call a Laozi lens.
A Laozi lens.
Yeah, a new way of seeing. This lens will allow you to critically observe the world around you, to start discerning maybe genuine wellness from what might just be a temporary fix or perhaps a moral bandage covering a deeper wound.
So less about cynicism, more about clarity.
Exactly. Get ready for some truly surprising insights, some aha moments perhaps, about the hidden implications of seemingly positive concepts in your daily life. It's all about seeing beyond the obvious layer.
All right, let's dive in. Maybe we can begin by revisiting a concept from our last deep dive, just to set the stage.
Good idea.
We spoke about Laozi's vision of a truly harmonious society. It almost sounds, well, utopian when you describe it, doesn't it?
It does have that quality, a place where the best leader is so perfectly attuned to the natural flow of life, the Tao, that they're practically invisible.
Right, the leader you barely know is there.
Exactly. And in this ideal state, success just kind of unfolds, achievements are made, things get done. But the people, feeling this profound sense of intrinsic satisfaction, simply say to themselves, wow, we did this ourselves. It all happened so naturally.
That sense of it just happened naturally is key. That's the ideal state, isn't it?
Yeah.
The way the Tao made manifest in the world, effortless and unseen.
It's a state of being so perfectly aligned with the underlying order of existence that everything simply is. There's no strain, no forced striving, just this organic flourishing where actions emerge naturally from a place of integrity, not because some rule book or moral code told you to do it.
That effortless alignment. It's something we so often overlook or maybe don't even believe is possible. Okay, now, I want you to join me in an imaginative scenario. Just picture this.
Okay, I'm with you.
You're walking into a magnificent museum. It's grand, marble floors, soaring ceilings, that hushed sense of reverence you get in places like that.
I can picture it.
And on one wall, displayed in these brilliant gleaming cases, is a vast collection of medals. But these aren't just any medals. These are accolades for heroic soldiers, for brilliant scientists who made world-changing discoveries, for selfless philanthropists, for tireless community leaders. You get the idea.
The highest honors society bestows.
Exactly. And as you gaze upon these shining honors, you can't help but feel a sense of admiration, right? Well, it's natural. We instinctively praise these virtues: courage, self-sacrifice, brilliance, generosity.
It's an instinctive human response, absolutely. We're taught from a very young age to admire these qualities. These are the hallmarks of what we consider a good society.
We celebrate them, we give awards for them, we tell stories about these heroes to our children. And then imagine Laozi, this wise, ancient figure, somehow materializes beside you. He gently places a hand on your shoulder, looks at you with those, deep, maybe slightly mischievous, all-seeing eyes, and he asks a question you never, ever expected to hear in a place like this. He says, "Friend, have you ever stopped to think what the very existence of these metals says about our world?"
Wow. Yeah. And that right there, for many people, is where the floor just drops out from under our conventional thinking about morality and virtue.
It completely reframes the whole scene.
It does. This isn't just a casual observation he's making. It's the profound core of Chapter 18 of the Tao Te Ching. These few deceptively simple lines are, you could argue, one of the most insightful, maybe most subversive, and certainly penetrating parts of Laozi's entire philosophy. It's less a direct criticism and more a profound, unsettling diagnostic.
That phrase, profound diagnostic, feels very accurate. It's like he's performing an autopsy on our values, cutting through the surface of what we celebrate to reveal a deeper, maybe uncomfortable truth underneath.
Precisely. Laozi lays out his argument in 4 parallel lines. They function almost like 4 perfectly polished mirrors, each reflecting the same core insight from a slightly different angle.
And that insight is?
He posits that many, perhaps even most, of the virtues we so readily praise are actually just remedial measures. They only appear, they only become necessary, they only get celebrated precisely because a more fundamental, natural, and ideal state has already been lost.
So he's not condemning the medicine itself.
Exactly. He's not condemning the medicine, but he's asking, pointedly, why do we seem to need so much medicine in the first place? What made us sick?
That's a subtle but incredibly powerful distinction. It's not about judging the acts of virtue, but understanding the conditions that make those acts stand out as virtuous. To really grasp the nuance here, let's turn to the chapter itself. Maybe you could share a couple of key translations. Translations often reveal different facets.
Certainly. Different translations can really illuminate the text. First, let's take the classic translation by D.C. Lau from 1963, which is known for its clarity and directness. It reads,
Okay.
When the great way falls into disuse, there is benevolence and rectitude. When cleverness emerges, there is great hypocrisy. When the 6 relations are at variance, there are filial children. When the state is benighted, there are loyal ministers.
Very direct, almost like statements of fact. And then there's Arthur Waley's version from 1934. Waley often offers a more literary, sometimes more provocative flavor. How does that one sound?
Waley's translation definitely has a different feel, perhaps a bit more confrontational, using stronger language. It goes,
Let's hear it.
It was when the great way declined that human kindness and morality arose. It was when intelligence and knowledge appeared that the great artifice began. It was when the 6 near ones were no longer at peace, that there was talk of dutiful sons, nor till fatherland was dark with strife did we hear of loyal slaves.
Wow, the word choice there, great artifice, loyal slaves, that really amplifies that diagnostic feeling, doesn't it? It explicitly frames these virtues not as pure good, but as responses to, well, decline and strife.
It certainly brings that interpretation to the forefront. Waley doesn't shy away from the potentially uncomfortable implications.
Let's break down each of these insights line by line, using maybe Lau's more neutral phrasing as a base to really unpack Laozi's diagnosis.
Sounds good. Let's start with that crucial first statement, the foundation of his whole argument. When the great way falls into disuse, there is benevolence and rectitude.
The great way, that's the Tao, right? That perfect natural order where everything just flows harmoniously.
Precisely. It's that state of effortless alignment we talked about earlier. Laozi observes that it is only when this fundamental harmony is abandoned, when it falls into disuse, that we feel the need to invent, promote, and celebrate specific moral codes like benevolence, Ren in Chinese, and righteousness, or rectitude, Yi.
So if things are truly operating according to the way, these concepts wouldn't even need to be singled out or emphasized. They'd just be part of the fabric of existence.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Consider a perfectly healthy person. Their body's natural functions, their organs, their immune system, they all work seamlessly together. That's the great way in action within the body.
You don't usually think about your liver or your heart when they're working perfectly.
Right? They function invisibly, harmoniously. You only become aware of them. You only start thinking about treatments or interventions when something goes wrong, when their natural function starts to fail.
Ah, so the benevolence and righteousness are like the medicine.
Precisely. They are the medicine, the supplements, the external interventions you need when the body is sick. And while we might praise the medicine for helping, Laozi points out that a body needing daily medicine isn't as fundamentally healthy as one that needs none at all. The very existence and celebration of the medicine indicates a prior illness, a deviation from the natural healthy state.
It's such a powerful analogy. It instantly shifts the focus from celebrating the solution, the virtue, to questioning the underlying problem, the loss of the way. Okay, this leads us directly to the second diagnosis. When cleverness emerges, there is great hypocrisy.
Or as Waley put it, when intelligence and knowledge appeared, that the great artifice began.
Yeah, that great artifice. This line implies that when human society begins to overvalue cunning, intricate strategy, intellectualism for its own sake, or building complex systems detached from natural simplicity, that's when great deception and artifice are inevitably born.
That's right. It's not suggesting intelligence itself is inherently bad, of course, but it's about how that intelligence is applied, especially when it becomes divorced from the simple, unadorned, trusting flow of the Tao.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Consider the modern world of cybersecurity, for instance. It's a perfect illustration. As the hackers' skill, their cleverness grows more sophisticated, the world of cyber deception, defenses, and countermeasures, you could call it the great hypocrisy or artifice, becomes ever more complex.
It's an arms race.
It's an endless, exhausting arms race. You build a stronger firewall, they devise a more intricate virus or phishing scheme. Each step forward in cleverness on one side necessitates a corresponding, often deceptive move on the other. When simple trust and straightforwardness are no longer the inherent foundation of human relationships or systems, then hypocrisy, deceit, and complex artifice become not just possible, but tragically inevitable. They become the constant shadow companions to cleverness.
That's a sobering thought, especially in our information age. Okay, then the third diagnosis. When the six relations are at variance, there are filial children. What are the six relations?
The six relations typically refers to the most basic, fundamental family ties. Parents and children, husbands and wives, elder and younger siblings. The core bonds of family.
Okay.
Laozi observes that when these fundamental relationships fall into disharmony when they are at variance, only then do we feel the need to specifically praise virtues like filial piety, respect and obedience towards parents and elders, or explicitly talk about parental love as distinct duties.
So again, the naming and praising signals an absence.
Exactly. In truly harmonious family relationships, love flows like the air they breathe naturally, invisibly, without ever needing a specific name or award. A child doesn't need to be constantly told to love their parents, nor do parents need constant reminders to care for their children. It simply is. But the moment you feel the need to hang a poster in your home that lists the rules of a happy family, or if you have to institute an award for the model child at the family reunion, it strongly suggests that the natural intrinsic bond has been strained or perhaps even broken. It now requires a kind of moral bandage and external reinforcement to hold it together. The praise, the award, the rule, they become necessary precisely because the underlying health, the effortless flow of affection, is gone. A specific virtue is elevated to compensate for the absence of the natural state.
That hits close to home for many modern family dynamics, I imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, and finally, diagnosis number 4. When the state is benighted, there are loyal ministers. Benighted meaning dark, chaotic, corrupt.
Yes, essentially when the country descends into chaos, corruption, instability, darkness, that's when we see the emergence of these figures we call loyal ministers, the ones who bravely stand up, often sacrificing themselves for what they believe is the greater good, even when the ruler or the system is failing.
And we all instinctively admire those heroes, right? The whistleblower, the principled objector, the one who stands against the tide.
Absolutely. We admire their courage, their integrity. But Laozi, with his penetrating insight, forces us to step back and ask the uncomfortable question. How did this crisis, this darkness, come to be in the first place? Why was such heroism even necessary?
The focus shifts again.
The very need for a hero, for someone to bravely step into the breach and be loyal against all odds, is itself a glaring symptom that the state, the country itself, is gravely ill. The loyal minister, while undoubtedly a person of great integrity and courage in their own right, is simultaneously a profound tragedy of their time.
A tragedy. How so?
Because their greatness, their loyalty, is etched against a backdrop of profound societal failure. Their heroism is a testament, really, to just how wrong things have gone. Their celebrated virtue highlights the depth of the surrounding darkness.
So putting it all together, it's absolutely crucial to understand that Laozi isn't rejecting these virtues themselves. He's not saying benevolence is bad, or filial piety is wrong, or loyalty is pointless.
Not at all. That's a common misunderstanding. He's saying there are symptoms, not signs of fundamental health. He's the master physician, remember. He's urging us not to be satisfied with simply administering the painkillers, the praise, the awards, or celebrating the heroic efforts of individuals who are fighting the symptoms.
He wants us to look deeper.
He wants us to dig deeper, to find the root cause of the pain, of the societal disease. His ultimate aspiration isn't for a world patched up by moral heroes and codes, but for a world so fundamentally whole, so naturally healthy according to the way, that it no longer needs them in the first place. He wants us to move beyond the remedial and strive towards the naturally flourishing state.
This initial diagnosis is incredibly powerful, and it certainly forces us to rethink our assumptions about what true societal well-being actually looks like. But it also inevitably raises deeper questions, doesn't it?
It definitely does.
Like, was Laozi merely observing these patterns neutrally, like a scientist? Or was he perhaps launching a subtle, or maybe not so subtle, philosophical attack, perhaps against his contemporary rivals like the Confucians, who emphasized precisely these virtues? And how have scholars throughout history wrestled with this seemingly controversial, counterintuitive idea?
Excellent questions. Let's peel back another layer of this chapter's wisdom and begin a deeper investigation into those very points.
Okay, let's dig in.
Indeed. Laozi's role here, as we framed it, is truly that of a diagnostician, not a moralist imposing rules. He's reading the symptoms of a society, much like a skilled doctor understands the subtle signals of a body that's out of balance.
And this diagnostic approach brings us to our first major line of inquiry, which feels like the absolute core of the chapter. Why is it that the more we seem to need to advocate for something, the more loudly we praise a virtue, the more it might actually signal that we are precisely lacking that very thing in its natural form?
It's the central paradox he presents. And as we heard, he lays out this insight through three parallel observations, or maybe we can call them diagnostic reports, each echoing the same profound truth.
Right, the ones about the great way, the family, and the state. Let's delve into those observations again, but maybe illuminate them with a few historical reflections or stories that scholars have used to understand them. Starting with the first. When the great way is abandoned, there is benevolence and righteousness.
Okay, so in that ideal, simple society, the state reflecting the great way people help each other, they act kindly, they do the right thing, not out of obligation, but out of a natural, heartfelt impulse. It's just how things are done.
Like breathing.
Exactly, like breathing. No one thinks their actions are particularly noble or worthy of special mention because everything is simply as it should be. It's that healthy person analogy. Again, you're completely unaware of your internal organs when they're functioning perfectly. You don't think about your liver or praise it for doing its job until it gets sick.
That absence of self-consciousness about virtue is key.
It is. And Laozi argues that when this foundational harmony, this great way, is abandoned, then, and only then, do we need to invent the medicine, the concepts, the rules, the promotion of benevolence and righteousness. As the renowned modern scholar Fu Perong astutely points out, Laozi isn't denying the immediate value of this medicine. It might be necessary when society is ill. But Fu Perong bluntly reminds us, we must never mistake taking medicine for a sign of health. A society that finds itself needing to vigorously promote benevolence and righteousness, putting up posters about kindness, giving awards for ethical behavior. By Laozi's diagnosis, that society is one that is already morally ailing. The louder the promotion, potentially, the deeper the underlying issue.
That truly shifts our perspective on things like public service campaigns or corporate ethics initiatives. Okay, and this concept extends just as seamlessly to the family unit, doesn't it? Which brings us to Laozi's second diagnostic report. When the 6 family relationships are not in harmony, there is filial piety and parental love.
Absolutely. In truly harmonious family relationships between parents and children, spouses, siblings, love flows naturally, unbidden. Parents love their children. Children are devoted to their parents, not because a rule book says so, but because it's an organic expression of emotion. It doesn't even need a specific name or concept attached to it, really. It just is.
So when does the concept of filial piety, yao in Chinese, become particularly dazzling, particularly celebrated, held up as this extraordinary virtue?
According to Laozi's logic, it happens precisely when cracks begin to appear in those fundamental family relationships, when the natural flow is disrupted.
I think you mentioned a story that can really bring this specific point to life, something from the Song Dynasty.
Yes, there's a well-known reflection inspired by the Song Dynasty thinker Su Che that illustrates this perfectly. Imagine 2 sons. The first son has a truly wonderful father, kind, supportive, wise, everything you'd hope for. The son loves and respects his father deeply, and their relationship is warm, easy, natural. Is this son devoted? Absolutely.
Ah.
Is he filial? Of course. But no one writes epic poems about him. No one holds him up as a unique paragon.
Why not?
Because his devotion is simply natural, expected, almost invisible. It doesn't stand out because the entire environment, the relationship itself, is healthy and harmonious.
Okay, so his virtue blends into the background of a good situation.
Mhm.
And the second son, I gather his situation is markedly different.
Markedly. Imagine the second son has a father who is, frankly, awful. Cruel, wicked, maybe even paranoid. He constantly tries to harm his own son, sets traps for him, tries to ruin his life, just relentlessly abusive.
That sounds horrific.
It is. Yet, despite this horrific abuse, the second son remains unfailingly devoted. He always tries to protect his father, often from the father's own self-destructive impulses. He continues to show him respect and care against all reason, against all instinct for self-preservation. This son's story becomes a legend.
Ah, he's the one who gets celebrated.
He becomes the benchmark for what it means to be a great son, a paragon of filial piety. His actions are seen as extraordinarily virtuous.
So the crucial insight here is that the son became a legend not just because of his own virtue, but directly because of his father's extreme vice. The darkness of the father's cruelty is what made the son's devotion shine so incredibly brightly. It's a tragic kind of brilliance.
Precisely. Laozi would argue that the praise heaped upon the son for his great filial piety is in fact a devastating indictment of the father's great lack of compassion. The virtue had to be named, had to be celebrated, precisely because the natural, healthy state of love and harmony within that relationship was so violently absent. The virtue is like a beautiful but ultimately tragic bandage over a very deep wound. Admirable in its own right, perhaps, but indicative of a profound underlying problem.
That reframes the idea of heroic virtue significantly. And then the third diagnosis follows the same logic. When the state is in chaos and disorder, there are loyal ministers. This one feels incredibly relevant to almost any period of political upheaval or instability, doesn't it?
It truly does. Think about history or even current events. When do these figures, these tragic, loyal ministers, tend to appear? Almost exclusively when the state is in chaos, when corrupt officials hold sway, when the leadership itself is failing, unjust, or incompetent.
There's a famous story from China's Tang Dynasty that illustrates this, right?
Yeah.
About an advisor and an emperor.
Yes, a very telling story. It's about a famously honest advisor speaking to one of the nation's greatest emperors, Taizong. This advisor, Wei Jing, known for his courage and willingness to speak truth to power, made a rather strange request one day. He said essentially, "Your Majesty, my greatest wish is that you allow me to be a good official. Please never force me into a position where I have to become a loyal official."
That's quite striking. I imagine the emperor would have been quite confused by that distinction. Aren't they basically the same thing? Isn't loyalty a prerequisite for being good?
That was the emperor's exact reaction. He asked, "Aren't they the same thing? Isn't a loyal official inherently a good one?" And the advisor, Wei Jiang, then explained the crucial difference, which perfectly captures Laozi's insight.
Okay, what was the difference?
A good official, Wei Jiang explained, is like a brilliant architect. They work constructively with a visionary leader, a wise king or emperor, to build a magnificent, peaceful, and prosperous city, metaphorically speaking. Everyone thrives, the work is creative and fulfilling, and both the leader and the official are celebrated for the golden age they create together. It's a harmonious, collaborative, constructive effort.
Right, building something positive. And the loyal official, by contrast, what kind of situation makes them loyal in this negative sense?
A loyal official, Wei Zheng continued, is like a brave firefighter. But this firefighter isn't just battling a random blaze. He is rushing into a burning building that the arsonist king himself has deliberately set ablaze through his own folly or malice.
Wow.
The firefighter might save a few people from the inferno, show incredible courage, remain loyal to the people or some ideal even as the kingdom burns. But often, this loyal official dies tragically in the flames, consumed by the disaster created by the ruler. The king is condemned for his evil, the city is often lost, and the firefighter is remembered as a tragic hero, a loyal man. But his loyalty was only made necessary, only made visible and celebrated because of the terrible disaster. His greatness is ultimately a monument to a terrible failure of leadership.
That advisor's speech is a perfect, poignant illustration of Laozi's thought, isn't it? A truly healthy political ecosystem needs good ministers who can build and nurture in times of peace and wisdom. It doesn't want to need loyal ministers whose heroism is forged in the fires of chaos and corruption.
Exactly. The praise for loyal ministers, well, understandable on one level, is, as Laozi would see it, a sad but accurate record of the state's chaos and disorder. Their fame highlights the system's failure.
This recurring theme that celebrated virtue signals an underlying lack, Was beautifully synthesized later by the scholar Wang Bi, wasn't it? During the Wei Jin dynasties.
Yes, Wang Bi, one of the most brilliant commentators on the Tao Te Ching, captured this idea powerfully. He famously said something like, "The greatest of beautiful names, meaning virtues or reputations, are born from the greatest of evils." This is what is meant by beauty and evil sharing the same gate.
Beauty and evil sharing the same gate. That's incredibly provocative. What does that really mean?
It means that the most beautiful reputations, the most celebrated virtues, often arise precisely from the greatest ugliness, failure, or disharmony. It reveals that what we perceive as polar opposites, beauty, like virtue, and evil, like chaos or suffering, can, in a deeper sense, originate from the same fundamental source, the same gate of imbalance or loss of the way.
Can you give us a couple more metaphors to help us really grasp that idea? It's quite abstract.
Certainly. Wang Bi himself and others inspired by him used several. The first is simple and builds on our earlier analogy. When epidemics prevail, famous doctors emerge.
Okay.
We rightly respect highly skilled doctors, their knowledge, their dedication, but the very reason the concept of a famous doctor becomes so prominent, why certain doctors become household names, is precisely because a dangerous plague or illness is sweeping through society.
Their fame is proportional to the crisis.
Exactly. In a truly healthy, disease-free, ideal state, where serious illness is rare, people wouldn't even need the term famous doctor in the same way. Their skills would still exist, but they wouldn't be so overtly celebrated because the context of widespread crisis wouldn't be there. Their fame is, in large part, a measure of the severity of the collective illness, not just their individual skill.
So the fame itself is a symptom of the larger problem, the epidemic. What's the second metaphor? You mentioned Zhuangzi earlier.
Yes. For the second, we turn to Zhuangzi, Laozi's most brilliant philosophical successor. It's a very famous image. Imagine two fish stranded together in a small puddle that is slowly, relentlessly drying up under the hot sun.
A desperate situation.
Terribly desperate. To survive, they press against each other, sharing the last vestiges of moisture from their mouths, keeping each other alive moment by moment. This act of sharing saliva to survive, or sometimes translated as moistening each other with spit, is profoundly moving when you visualize it. It seems noble. It's a beautiful, desperate display of mutual aid, of virtue in the face of imminent death. One would look at it and feel a deep sense of admiration for their struggle and cooperation.
It sounds incredibly poignant. But Zhuangzi, being Zhuangzi, then asks the critical, counterintuitive question, doesn't he?
He always does. He asks, is this desperate, beautiful struggle really what the fish truly desire? Is this the pinnacle of fish existence?
And the answer is...
No, of course not. What they truly yearn for, Zhuangzi suggests, is the vast, deep river or the boundless ocean, a place so abundant with water, so full of life that they can swim freely, entirely forgetting that they even need each other just to survive. They can simply be together in the immense body of water, but independent within its supportive fullness. There's absolutely no need for the desperate virtue of moistening each other because the life-giving water, the Tao, is everywhere, abundant and natural.
And Wang Bi connects this Zhuangzi image perfectly back to Laozi's thought in Chapter 18.
He does. Wang Bi astutely pointed out, commenting on this very dynamic. When the way of fish forgetting each other in the rivers and lakes is lost, the virtue of moistening each other is born. It is precisely because the fish have lost the great way, the ideal state of being able to effortlessly forget each other in the rivers and lakes, that boundless, natural, harmonious existence, that the specific named virtue of moistening each other arises and seems so admirable.
So the touching, admirable nature of their struggle, their virtue,
is itself a direct sign of their predicament, their dire situation, their loss of the ideal state. The virtue is celebrated only because the natural, healthy, abundant state, the river, has been lost.
So looking back at Laozi's words now, through these analogies, the sick patient needing medicine, the son with the cruel father, the loyal minister in chaos, the famous doctor during a plague, the fish in the drying puddle, it becomes much clearer. The celebrated virtues like benevolence and righteousness, or filial piety and parental love, are like the famous doctor or the moistening each other fish.
Exactly. Their very appearance and the praise they garner are themselves strong evidence that we've already lost that more desirable, naturally healthy, effortless, ideal state, what Laozi calls the great way, and Zhuangzi evokes as the rivers and lakes.
This logic still applies powerfully today, doesn't it? For example, think about the corporate world again. What about a company that feels the constant need to hold daily meetings, put up banners, and relentlessly push slogans emphasizing the spirit of struggle or unyielding effort? What might that indicate through a Laozi lens?
Well, applying Laozi's diagnostic thinking, it strongly suggests that something fundamental might be wrong internally. Perhaps its core incentive mechanisms are broken, maybe its corporate culture is toxic or uninspiring, or maybe its future prospects look bleak to the employees.
So the company can no longer rely on natural enthusiasm.
Right. It can no longer naturally inspire the intrinsic motivation, the inherent drive of its employees. So it has to resort to these external, often loud, slogan-based moral appeals: strive harder, be relentless. Essentially trying to compensate for a deeper structural or motivational issue. The louder and more frequent the celebration of the struggle, the more likely it is that it's a symptom of a deeper systemic problem within the organization.
That's precisely Laozi's diagnostic lens at work, seeing the call for virtue as a potential sign of underlying disharmony.
Now, here's where things get really intriguing for anyone studying the Tao Te Ching historically. In the version that most of us read today, the standard transmitted text, there's that one particularly, well, explosive line we mentioned. When cleverness emerges, there's great hypocrisy. Yes, that line. It really stands out.
And for centuries, this line has often been seen as the smoking gun, the clear evidence suggesting Laozi was launching a direct, maybe even sarcastic, attack on his philosophical rivals, the Confucians.
Because the Confucians greatly valued learned wisdom, detailed social rituals, and intellectual cultivation, things that could potentially be seen as cleverness leading to artifice or hypocrisy, if not grounded in genuine feeling.
Exactly. That line certainly fueled centuries of debate about Laozi's true intent and his relationship with Confucianism. But then something remarkable happened in 1993. A discovery in a place called Gudian in China's Hubei province.
Ah, the Godian bamboo slips, a momentous discovery.
Archaeologists unearthed tombs containing bundles of bamboo slips, and on some of them was the oldest known copy of the Tao Te Ching, dating back to perhaps 300 BCE. And the bombshell. In that ancient text, that fiery line, when cleverness emerges, there is great hypocrisy, is completely missing. It's just not there.
A missing sentence of such potentially huge significance. That's not just a minor variation, it's a major archaeological and philosophical revelation.
So how does that stunning disappearance, or perhaps non-appearance in the original, change our understanding of Chapter 18?
Well, it fundamentally shakes the traditional, perhaps overly simplistic view of Laozi as primarily an anti-Confucian polemicist. It doesn't disprove any tension, but it complicates the narrative significantly. It's like suddenly realizing you can look at the same object, this chapter, through three quite different prisms, and each prism reveals a different facet of its meaning.
Okay, intriguing.
Yeah.
What are these three prisms, these different ways of seeing Chapter 18, especially in light of the Godian find?
All right, prism number one is the anti-Confucian attack. This is the traditional view, the one that heavily relied on that hypocrisy line. It holds that Laozi is, in fact, systematically critiquing, maybe even tearing down, the core values promoted by Confucianism: benevolence, Ren; righteousness, Yu Sao; filial piety, Shao; and loyalty, Zong.
And the hypocrisy line was key to that interpretation.
It was seen as the sharpest jab, a direct critique of the Confucian emphasis on ritual propriety, lie, and learned knowledge, suggesting that their system, by overly defining and prescribing virtue, inadvertently creates hypocrisy or artifice.
Okay, so that's the confrontational view. What's the second prism?
Prism number two is the political allegory. This view reads the chapter less as a direct attack on another school and more as a succinct, almost melancholy history of a state's decline from an ideal form of governance.
How so?
The ideal government, in the Taoist sense, practices wu wei, that effortless action aligned with the natural flow. In such a state, the people are naturally good, naturally cooperative, without needing explicit rules or moral campaigns. They simply are. But this interpretation suggests when a state has to start putting up posters about being benevolent, giving out medals for loyal officials, or making laws enforcing filial piety, it's a clear diagnostic sign that the political system itself is already deeply fundamentally ill. The virtues aren't the solution. Their emergence signals the political dysfunction.
That connects beautifully back to that Tang Dynasty advisor story about the good versus the loyal official. The need for loyalty signals a problem state.
Precisely. The political health is failing.
Okay, and the third prism, the one particularly inspired or strengthened by the Godian discovery.
Prism number three is what we might call the natural process view. This is a newer perspective, gaining influence thanks to discoveries like Godian. It suggests that maybe Laozi wasn't being critical or sarcastic at all. Perhaps he was simply describing a natural phenomenon with a kind of calm, detached, almost scientific observation.
A natural phenomenon, how does that work?
Think of it this way. The Great Way, the underlying harmony, is like the sun. When the sun is high and bright in the sky, its light is so brilliant and pervasive that you can't really see the individual stars. They're still there, obviously, but their faint light is completely overshadowed.
Okay.
But when the sun sets, when the Great Way is abandoned or obscured, then, in the resulting darkness, the individual stars become visible. Virtues like benevolence, righteousness, filial piety, loyalty, they are like those stars.
Ah, so they become visible because the primary light source is gone.
Exactly. They are beautiful, perhaps even necessary guides in the darkness, but their very visibility, their prominence, is a clear and unmistakable sign that the sun of the Great Way, the natural, effortless harmony, is absent. Their existence signals a fundamental change in the cosmic or societal conditions.
That interpretation feels much more neutral, doesn't it? More cosmic in its perspective, less about direct human critique.
It does. It frames Laozi less as an attacker and more as a profound observer of the natural ebb and flow of societal health and its symptoms. And importantly, these three interpretations, anti-Confucian, political allegory, natural process, aren't necessarily mutually exclusive. They might represent different layers of Laozi's profound wisdom, resonating differently depending on the context or the reader's own lens.
And the Gordian bamboo slips offered another fascinating clue, didn't they? Beyond just the missing hypocrisy line, it involved a subtle word change that hints at this evolving interpretation.
They did indeed. It's another small detail with potentially big implications. Where most of our modern standard texts of the Tao Te Ching say, when the state is in chaos or benighted, there are loyal ministers, zhongshen. That oldest known text from Gudian says there are upright ministers, zhenzhen.
Upright versus loyal, Zhen versus Zong. What's the significance of that single word difference?
It's potentially huge. An upright official, zhen, generally implies a person of broad moral integrity, someone who acts with rectitude and correctness according to perhaps a more universal standard. A loyal official, zhang, however, carries a much stronger connotation, especially within the later Confucian tradition, of specific fidelity and allegiance to a particular ruler, dynasty, or state hierarchy. Loyalty is a very specific relational virtue in Confucian ethics, emphasizing duty within the social order.
So the possible shifts from the more general upright in the older text to the more politically specific loyal in later texts might suggest.
It might suggest that the Tao Te Ching wasn't carved in stone from day one, but was perhaps a living, breathing text. It might have evolved over centuries, its language possibly sharpened or subtly altered through its ongoing dialogue, debates, and interactions with other influential schools of thought, most notably Confucianism. This discovery really encourages us to see these ancient texts not as fixed monolithic pronouncements, but more like dynamic crystals of wisdom, refracting light differently as they grew and interacted with their intellectual environment.
That adds such richness to understanding these classics. They weren't just written, they were lived and debated.
Absolutely. And this whole discussion, especially around cleverness, hypocrisy, and the potential manipulation of virtue, brings us quite naturally to our third deep investigation prompted by this chapter, when virtue itself becomes the perfect disguise.
Right, because even if that line about great hypocrisy was added later to the text, it certainly seems to prophesy a timeless and deeply human dilemma, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How can we possibly tell what is genuine virtue and what is merely a mask, especially when that mask is performed with absolute perfection?
It's a chilling question, and history provides some stark examples. To explore it, we can turn to the cautionary tale of one of history's most infamous performance artists of virtue. We won't use his real name, but let's call him the saintly schemer.
The saintly schemer.
Mm.
Okay. Tell us about him. Before this man eventually seized the throne of an entire empire, his public life story was, by all accounts, literally a flawless textbook on how to be a perfect Confucian saint.
So, what specific virtues did he display so convincingly in the public eye? What built this reputation?
Well, first, he came from a family of immense power and privilege, yet he cultivated an image of living a famously simple, even frugal life, shunning extravagance. He was known as a brilliant scholar of the classics, a master of literature and ritual, yet he always presented himself with utmost humility.
Humility from a position of power, always noticeable.
Exactly. And his family devotion was legendary. He was incredibly devoted to his widowed mother. He took in his orphan nephew and raised him meticulously as his own son. And perhaps most dramatically, when his powerful uncle, the de facto ruler and commander of all the armies, fell gravely ill, this saintly schemer apparently stayed by his bedside for months on end, never even changing his robes, tending to his every need out of profound devotion and filial piety.
That's an extraordinary display, almost superhuman dedication.
It gets even more extreme. To demonstrate his absolute commitment to justice and impartiality, even above his own family ties, he reportedly forced his own son, who had committed some crime, to take his own life. This was seen as proof that he placed the law and the state's welfare above any personal sentiment.
That's an astonishing, almost terrifying level of moral rigor, or at least the appearance of it. His reputation must have been absolutely unparalleled.
It was. The imperial court, the scholars, the common people, they all looked to him as the moral compass of the nation, a living embodiment of Confucian ideals, practically a living saint. And yet, it was this very saint who, using the most sophisticated political maneuvering, Laozi might call it, cleverness, turned this meticulously crafted virtue into the perfect disguise. Step by calculated step, he leveraged his flawless reputation to consolidate power and eventually seize the imperial throne for himself, performing what history would later condemn as one of the greatest acts of hypocrisy and usurpation.
So how exactly did he weaponize these virtues? How did he manage such an elaborate long-term deception? What were the mechanics of it?
His performance of humility, for instance, was apparently a masterpiece of political theater. Whenever he was offered more power or a higher title by the grateful court positions he secretly craved and engineered, he wouldn't just accept.
Oh no, what would he do?
He would stage a grand public refusal. He would weep before the assembled officials, insisting he was utterly unworthy, that he was just a simple scholar who preferred a quiet life. He'd praise the imperial family he was about to displace. Only after this elaborate, ritualized performance of 3 refusals, a common trope in courtly transitions, meant to show reluctance, would he finally, seemingly overcome with duty, reluctantly accept the position, having thoroughly convinced almost everyone of his pure intentions and genuine modesty.
That's a truly insidious use of humility, isn't it? Where the very act of seeming to reject power becomes the most effective strategy for attaining it. What about other virtues, like benevolence? Did he use that as well?
He certainly did, particularly to win the hearts of the common people. He would make very public displays of donating his vast personal fortune to relieve the poor, making sure everyone knew of his immense generosity. During times of famine, he famously made a show of eating only simple vegetarian food, ostensibly to show solidarity with the suffering masses, while likely dining privately quite well. All of these seemingly selfless acts of perfect virtue paved the way for his final move: the usurpation of the throne from the young emperor he was supposedly protecting. The saintly schemer's story is a stark transformation from being seen as a living saint to being condemned by later historians as a treacherous usurper.
This story leaves us with a truly haunting question, one that a great poet, reflecting on this man centuries later, famously asked. If this man had died at the height of his fame, when his performance of virtue was most convincing, when everyone believed him to be a saint, who in all the world could ever known the truth from the lie?
Chilling. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other figures in history, lauded for their virtue, might have been such master schemers, their true intentions forever hidden beneath a perfect performance?
It does. And Laozi's warning, whether it was in the original text or added later to reflect such historical realities, remains profound and deeply relevant. When virtue is performed to perfection, when humility becomes the ultimate disguise, it becomes almost impossible for ordinary people, maybe even for keen observers, to discern what is real and what is artifice. It's a powerful reminder that appearances can be deeply deceiving, and sometimes the most celebrated virtues can be the most effective masks for ulterior motives.
So as our intellectual journey through the complexities of Chapter 18 comes towards a close, after all these diagnoses, stories, and interpretations, what is Laozi really trying to tell us? Is the takeaway that we should just be cynical? Should we abandon kindness, loyalty, filial piety altogether?
Not at all. I think that's crucial to emphasize. He's not advocating for the absence of these positive human qualities. He's advocating for their natural, unforced emergence from a state of genuine harmony, rather than their forced application as a remedy for disharmony. He wants us to move towards a state where these virtues are inherent, spontaneous, and perhaps even unnamed, rather than compensatory measures for a deeper lack.
Okay. So through this re-examination of Chapter 18, it feels like we've been given maybe 3 unique intellectual tools, a kind of diagnostic kit, perhaps, for navigating our complex world, a way to bridge this ancient wisdom with our contemporary lives.
That's a great way to put it, a diagnostic kit. Tell us about these tools. How can we actively use them?
All right, the first tool, as we've discussed, is the diagnostic mindset of a master physician. This tool encourages us to look beyond the surface, to see through the loudly praised moral slogans or celebrated virtues, and examine the deeper societal, organizational, or even personal illness that might lie beneath.
not just accepting the praise at face value.
Exactly. It warns us not to be satisfied with admiring the touching virtue of those fish desperately sharing moisture in the drying puddle. While their action is admirable in that context, this mindset prompts us to ask the harder, more fundamental question. Why did we lose the great river, the abundant state, in the first place? It's about shifting focus from merely treating symptoms to actively seeking the root cause of the ailment, whether it's in our communities, our workplaces, our families, or even within ourselves.
So it's about not just admiring the bandage, but persistently asking about the nature of the wound underneath it. That makes sense. What's the second tool?
The second tool is the dynamic perspective of an intellectual archaeologist. This comes from understanding the significance of things like the Gaudian slips. It helps us appreciate that a classic text, like the Tao Te Ching, isn't necessarily a static, unchangeable Bible frozen in time.
But rather a living thing.
Precisely. A living crystal of wisdom that's evolved, been interpreted, and perhaps even subtly altered through history. Understanding how the text itself might have changed over centuries allows us to peel back layers of interpretation and get potentially closer to the author's original, perhaps more nuanced insights. It teaches us the value of questioning fixed narratives, digging for textual evidence, and appreciating the historical context, even when dealing with things we consider timeless classics.
It encourages intellectual humility and curiosity about origins. I like that.
Mm.
And the third tool from our diagnostic kit.
The third tool is a heightened alertness to human performance. The story of the saintly schemer serves as a stark, almost cold mirror, reflecting the potentially two-faced nature of cleverness and great hypocrisy that Laozi warns about.
A cautionary tale.
Definitely. It reminds us that in our own modern age, an age arguably even more saturated with carefully curated personal brands, social media personas, and what you might call performance personalities, maintaining clear judgment and developing the capacity to discern genuine intention from skillful artifice is perhaps our own timeless and increasingly crucial challenge. Laozi's ancient insights remain startlingly sharp and relevant for navigating this complex social landscape.
We've certainly explored the theory, the history, the philosophical nuances. We've seen Laozi's wisdom echoed in historical figures and cautionary tales, but the big question always is, how do we take this profound, maybe unsettling insight and actually apply it to our own daily lives right here, right now?
Yes, how do we cultivate what you earlier called that Taoist eye? How do we practice seeing beyond the surface, beyond the celebrated symptom in our everyday interactions?
Let's try to make this really concrete. Let's explore a couple of vivid, modern case studies where we can try on this Laozi lens.
Okay, let's bring it home. How can we integrate this symptom-based thinking into our everyday experiences? Maybe start with the workplace.
All right, the corporate world. Think about a company, maybe one you've worked for, that constantly gives out awards, maybe outstanding teamwork awards, or prominently features an employee of the month, complete with a photo and a write-up. On the surface, this seems incredibly positive, right? A clear celebration of good behavior, collaboration, and individual achievement.
Standard practice in many places, seen as morale-boosting, recognizing effort.
And most companies would certainly highlight these programs as evidence of a healthy, productive, appreciative culture. But if we put on our Laozi diagnostic lens, we might start asking some different questions. We might ask, why does teamwork need to be so loudly and frequently celebrated with a specific award?
What might be the answer?
Well, perhaps it's because the underlying day-to-day culture is actually one of intense, maybe even toxic competition between individuals or departments. Or perhaps the organization is riddled with information silos that actively prevent easy collaboration. Or maybe the teams are chronically understaffed, forcing people into heroic efforts just to keep things afloat.
So the award for teamwork might then become a symptom.
It could be interpreted that way, a symptom of a system that is fundamentally not collaborative in its natural state. A system where individual heroics or forced cooperation are needed to compensate for deeper systemic flaws, like poor communication, bad incentives, or lack of resources.
So in this light, the Employee of the Month plaque hanging on the wall.
Yeah.
It could be seen as the modern equivalent of Laozi's loyal minister appearing in a chaotic corporate state.
That's a provocative way to put it, but yes. It's a recognition, perhaps, of heroic individual effort that is compensating for a deeper systemic failure or imbalance, rather than being a genuine sign of a naturally flowing, healthy, supportive work environment where such efforts are the norm, not the exception needing special praise.
The virtue exceptional performance or teamwork is celebrated precisely because its natural, effortless state, seamless, unacknowledged collaboration, and sustainable effort is missing or difficult to achieve within that system. The award, while potentially well-intentioned, inadvertently highlights a lack.
Exactly. It potentially reveals a deep-seated issue that the award itself, no matter how shiny, cannot truly fix.
Okay, that's a powerful reframing of something very common. Now, let's turn to another area that touches so many of us, modern parenting. Many parents today feel immense pressure, internal and external, to schedule specific blocks of quality time with their children.
Oh yes, the ubiquitous quality time.
We meticulously block it out on the calendar, plan enriching activities, sometimes feel guilty if we don't, and then often, let's be honest, post the happy photos on social media,
Yeah.
partly perhaps to prove to ourselves and others that it happened, that we're doing a good job.
And again, on the surface, it feels positive. It feels like responsible, loving parenting, a conscious effort to connect amidst busy lives, a demonstration of love and commitment.
Applying the Laozi lens.
But in an ideal Dell state of a family, perhaps, love and connection are more like the air. They're ideally always present, flowing naturally, implicitly through the thousands of small, unnamed, effortless moments of daily life.
Like what?
Like the quiet conversation while making dinner together, the shared laughter over a silly joke before bed, the spontaneous hug for no reason, the patient listening to a long story about school. These moments don't typically need to be scheduled, labeled, or documented. They simply are the fabric of connection.
So the very concept of quality time needing to be consciously scheduled and designated, it might signal something deeper, is amiss.
Following Laozi's logic, it might arise precisely because, as he puts it in a broader sense, the six relations are not in harmony, meaning the natural, easy flow of connection has been disrupted. It could be seen as a symptom of a modern life so fragmented by work demands, school pressures, endless digital distractions, and overscheduling that genuine, relaxed connection has become difficult to sustain organically. Therefore, it has to be artificially manufactured, designated as a special event, cordoned off from the rest of life.
So quality time becomes the filial piety and parental love that needs to be specifically named, praised, and maybe even performed.
Precisely because the natural, unnamed background flow of effortless love and connection has been disrupted or feels insufficient.
Yeah.
The desire for quality time is beautiful and understandable, of course, but the perceived necessity to schedule it so deliberately might reveal a deeper struggle for maintaining connection in a world that constantly pulls families apart.
This is truly a profound and perhaps slightly uncomfortable way of looking at the world and our own behaviors. It's about shifting our perception consistently from the surface appearance to the underlying currents, trying to discern true natural wellness from the often necessary but ultimately symptomatic ways we manage its absence.
It really is. It challenges us to be more observant, more questioning, not in a negative way, but in a way that seeks deeper understanding. And that leads us directly to a practical, actionable takeaway for you, our listeners, to try this week. Something you can integrate into your daily life to practice this perspective.
Okay, let's make it tangible.
I'd like to offer a small practice. Let's call this practice the Symptom Thermometer.
The symptom thermometer, I like that name. So the idea is not just measuring the fever, the symptom, but using that reading to understand the underlying condition, maybe asking why the fever exists at all.
Exactly. The principle is straightforward. Laozi teaches us, in essence, that celebrated virtues or praiseworthy actions are often like a thermometer's reading. The reading itself isn't inherently good or bad. A high temperature might mean the body is fighting infection, which is good in a way, but it is a vital signal. It tells us something about the underlying condition of the system, whether that system is a person, a family, a company, or even a whole society.
And this practice helps us develop that skill.
Yes, it helps us cultivate that deep diagnostic skill Laozi exemplifies to not just applaud the symptom, the high reading, the virtuous act, but to also gently, compassionately inquire about the source of the fever, the underlying imbalance.
So how do we actually apply this symptom thermometer in our daily lives? What does it look like in action this week?
It's a simple two-step process. This week, whenever you encounter something or someone being praised, or you yourself feel inclined to praise something, perhaps you read a news story about a workplace hero who consistently works insane hours and sacrifices their personal life for a project, or maybe find yourself praising a child for being especially well-behaved and quiet during a particularly chaotic or stressful family gathering. Try this.
Okay, so step one.
Step 1. Appreciate the symptom. This is crucial. Genuinely acknowledge and admire the positive action itself. The employee is indeed dedicated, and their effort likely made a difference. The child is indeed being considerate and adaptable in that moment, which is commendable. Don't immediately jump to cynicism about the person or dismiss their immediate good deed. Recognize its value within its context.
Okay, appreciate the positive action first, then step 2, the diagnostic part.
Step 2, read the temperature. After acknowledging the positive, silently and gently ask yourself, what underlying imbalance, lack, or pressure might have made this admirable action so necessary, so noticeable, so praiseworthy?
Can you give examples of those questions?
Sure. For the overtime hero, you might silently ask, is our team perhaps chronically understaffed? Is our workflow or process fundamentally broken, requiring this person's heroic, possibly unsustainable effort just to compensate for systemic flaws? For the unusually well-behaved child in the midst of chaos, you might gently wonder, was the environment perhaps so stressful or overwhelming for them that they instinctively felt the need to be quiet and small, almost invisible, just to feel safe or avoid adding to the tension? Is their good behavior, in this instance, a coping mechanism, a response to anxiety, rather than a spontaneous expression of natural ease?
So the goal here is absolutely not to become cynical or critical of the individual performing the action. That's important.
Critically important. The goal is to cultivate a more complete, compassionate, and holistic perspective. It's about seeing the larger picture, the system surrounding the individual act.
It's trying to see that behind many celebrated individual acts of virtue or heroism, there is often a larger system, maybe a family dynamic, a corporate culture, a societal structure that is subtly, or perhaps not so subtly, crying out for attention, for healing, for rebalancing.
Precisely. This practice is simply the beginning of consciously shifting your sight. Just a little, from focusing solely on the symptom to also considering the system, from admiring only the virtue to also seeking the way, that underlying state of natural harmony.
This has been a truly eye-opening deep dive into just a few lines of the Tao Te Ching. Chapter 18 really challenges us to look beyond the surface in a profound way, doesn't it?
It really does.
When we are moved, as we naturally are, by the story of a devoted child caring for a difficult parent, or a loyal patriot sacrificing for their country in dark times, we can still feel the beauty and power of that individual act. But perhaps now we can also remember Laozi's deeper lesson whispering alongside it.
What's that whisper?
He reminds us, perhaps, that every celebrated virtue casts a shadow. And in that shadow lies the memory, or maybe the possibility, of a world that is more whole, more naturally harmonious, more effortlessly free. He isn't asking us to abandon righteousness or loyalty or love. I think he's yearning for a world where such qualities are so natural, so deeply woven into the fabric of life, that they become as invisible as taken for granted and as essential as the air we breathe.
That's beautifully put. This diagnosis in Chapter 18 is arguably one of the most profound in the entire Tao Te Ching. It cuts right to the bone of our moral assumptions. But if this chapter is the diagnosis of society's complex ills, what then is Laozi's prescription? What's his proposed cure? Does he offer one?
And that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's exactly what we'll explore next time. Because in the very next chapter, Chapter 19, Laozi prescribes a medicine so strong, so radical, so seemingly counterintuitive, that it has shocked and bewildered and inspired readers for over 2 millennia.
He doesn't just suggest we try harder to cultivate the standard virtues.
No, he suggests we do the opposite. He suggests we might need to abandon the entire project of striving for certain kinds of named virtues. He says, quite shockingly,
abandon holiness, discard wisdom, and the people will benefit 100-fold. Abandon benevolence, discard righteousness, and the people will return to natural affection.
He is telling us, quite literally it seems, to get rid of the very things our civilizations often hold most dear: holiness, wisdom, benevolence, righteousness, the very foundations of our moral and social order. Is this the ultimate key to unlocking a higher, more natural form of civilization? Or is it a dangerous prescription for chaos and decline?
That is the provocative question we'll wrestle with.
We will indeed explore that truly radical prescription next time.
So until then, perhaps keep practicing with your symptom thermometer this week. Just observe. Notice how or if it begins to shift your perspective, and what new insights it might bring you about the world around you and the stories we tell about it.
We hope the wisdom of Laozi continues to provide you with a unique and valuable lens to understand and navigate the complexities of modern life.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today.
Yes, thank you. We look forward to our next exploration with you.